My best friend went ballistic when she found out my boyfriend was going to propose, and now she's trying to destroy our relationship. What is going on? My boyfriend, we'll call him Blake, 25M, and I, 25F, have been together for 3 years. Before we dated, we were co-workers at a retail store when we were both 17. The first thing I noticed about Blake when we met was that he never smiled or showed any emotion. He always had a very serious, almost vacant look on his face. He hardly, if ever, displayed any emotional sentiment. Imagine Eminem or Shadow from Sonic with their perpetually serious expressions. That's how Blake is. Even when customers or our co-workers tried to joke with him, he never cracked a smile or laughed, which sometimes made things awkward. However, Blake has always been respectful to those around him and never once raised his voice throughout his entire career. Our co-workers always thought Blake was unusual and warned me to avoid him. However, despite that, Blake and I ended up getting along great and became good friends. I never really minded that he never showed any emotions because I still thought he was a good person. He even tolerated my loud, extroverted nature. Over the years, Blake and I became very close, and I would occasionally see him smile or laugh, which I would lightly tease him about when it happened. On my 22nd birthday, which also fell on Valentine's Day, Blake asked me to come over to his house and said it was serious. When I arrived, his place was filled with decorations and flowers, and he was dressed nicely. He gave a long speech about how much our friendship meant to him, how grateful he was to have met me, and he asked if I wanted to be his girlfriend. It felt like I was in a 1970s romantic comedy. It was the first time I had seen Blake so vulnerable. Although he still maintained his characteristic serious expression, I could tell he was extremely nervous. Naturally, I said yes, and we have been a happy couple ever since. Now on to the issue. My best friend, let's call her Sarah, 26F, and I have been friends since we were in 5th grade. Sarah and I were each other's partners in crime, and we were very close before I met Blake. She had never met Blake because when he and I first began talking, they were barely interacting, and by the time we graduated high school, she had moved away to live with her father in another city. So she never had the opportunity to meet him. Of course, I talked about him and showed pictures of him and me together once we became closer and started dating. However, she once commented that she found it odd that he never really smiled or seemed happy when he was with me and suggested that I shouldn't date someone who doesn't seem joyful around me. I brushed it off and assured her that's just how he is and that he is, in fact, a kind person. Looking back, I probably should not have ignored what she said, but at the time I thought she was just being a protective friend. Recently, Sarah returned to our city and wanted the three of us to meet. We decided to meet at a restaurant that Sarah and I used to frequent. When we arrived, Sarah and I greeted each other excitedly, squealing like little girls, while Blake simply stood and watched us. When Sarah looked at Blake, I noticed her expression immediately changed. She awkwardly smiled, shook his hand, and only said hello to him briefly. Blake nonchalantly said it was good to meet her. Then, she went back to talking to me, completely ignoring Blake. When we received our menus, Blake couldn't find a meal he liked and said he would be satisfied with a small appetizer. Sarah unexpectedly said, "Why? Is nothing here good enough for you? Why would you agree to come here if you weren't going to order anything?" She tried to deliver it as a joke, but it was obvious that it was not meant humorously. I defended Blake, saying he could have whatever he liked and it wasn't a big deal. Sarah then dropped the subject. Throughout dinner, Sarah continued to ignore Blake and only spoke to me. Blake remained silent and simply observed us, as he is normally not very talkative when meeting new people. When she did include him, she only asked him questions that required a one-word answer. And when he answered, she would either give him side-eye or simply say, "Okay then." I could already tell that Sarah did not like Blake, but I couldn't understand why. Although she wasn't overtly rude to him, I could tell she was making snide remarks about how he was emotionless and whatnot. At one point, she excused herself to go to the bathroom, and when she left, I asked Blake if he was alright. He assured me he was fine and that he just wanted me to catch up with my friend. I apologized for Sarah's behavior, and he said he didn't mind and was simply happy I was with my friend. I was relieved he wasn't hurt by the situation, though I still felt sorry for him. After dinner, the three of us went for a walk to see the nearby buildings and stores, and Sarah appeared to be more cheerful. We then encountered a person walking a small puppy. I love dogs so very much, and Sarah and I cooed and giggled at how cute the puppy was. Blake simply stood, watching us admire the puppy. Once the dog owner left, Sarah turned to Blake and immediately became angry, asking, "How on earth could you not even smile for a puppy? Are you seriously that emotionless?" I was immediately shocked by her sudden change in tone and was about to say something, but Blake simply shrugged and walked away, continuing our walk. I asked Sarah what her problem was, and she immediately apologized and said she didn't mean to shout. Our walk then became awkward. I wanted to go home, but I also felt sorry for Sarah because she had another event planned for the three of us that she had already paid for, so I decided to tolerate it until the end. I then needed to use the restroom, and we found a nearby store. I went inside, and Blake and Sarah waited for me outside. When I returned, I found Sarah hysterically yelling at Blake. I immediately ran over to them and asked what was happening. Sarah was in a state of hysterics, continuously yelling, "It is not going to happen. I will never allow this to happen." I asked her what she meant, but she only stated that Blake was a complete psychopath and demanded that I break up with him. I looked at Blake, who appeared just as shocked as I was. I repeatedly tried to ask both of them what had happened, but neither would answer, which frightened me. People began staring, and I desperately tried to calm Sarah down to defuse the situation. Eventually, I told Blake to return to the car so we could go home, and I would call an Uber for Sarah. When we were alone, I tried once more to get Sarah to explain what had occurred, but she remained silent. Blake returned to pick me up, and Sarah stared at him intensely while he kept his head down. I did not understand what was happening and assumed they had had an argument. Thankfully, Sarah's Uber eventually arrived and took her back to her hotel. Our car ride home was awkwardly silent, but as soon as we got home, I demanded to know what had transpired between him and Sarah. Blake remained silent, and at that point, I grew irritated with both of them for not answering my questions. Blake said he couldn't explain what had happened but that he was very sorry for what occurred. That made me even more confused, and I pleaded with him to please just explain. He only said that he swore he did nothing wrong and simply couldn't explain it. I then told him that I would sleep in the guest bedroom because I couldn't handle the situation, especially since I still had no answer regarding what had occurred between them. He said he understood, told me he loved me, and went to our room. This all happened only a few hours ago. I am currently lying in the guest room, confused and frightened. I know that Sarah and Blake did not really get along, but I do not understand what could have caused such a huge fight that neither of them can explain. About an hour ago, I received a text from Sarah. I will copy and paste it here. "Sarah, I'm really sorry about what happened tonight, but please listen to me. You need to break up with Blake. He is a complete psychopath who is only using you. He doesn't deserve you. I'm telling you this because I love you and want to protect you. Please break up with him." I have not responded to her text because I know that if I ask again about what happened between them, she will not provide any explanation. Reddit, I do not know what to do. I do not know if Sarah said something to Blake or if Blake said something to Sarah that caused all of this, but I am afraid that neither of them will tell me. Does Sarah simply dislike Blake because he does not show much emotion? Any advice on how I can get the truth or at least some answers would be appreciated. TL, Doctor, my best friend and boyfriend got into a fight, and now my best friend wants me to break up with him but refuses to explain what happened. Update. Hello everyone, I'm back with a new update. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read and offer advice on my post. After the night I made the post, I had time to reflect on everything that happened. I now realize that I could have handled the situation better and should not have allowed Sarah to continue her terrible behavior toward Blake. The fact that neither of them would explain what was happening frustrated me, and my anxiety got the better of me. I wanted to hear Blake's side first, so I turned off my phone and spent the day reading Reddit stories, learning how to use the platform better, and going for a run to clear my mind. Once Blake returned home, I asked if we could talk, and he agreed. Following the advice of a kind Redditor, I sat him down and began by apologizing for walking away from him the previous night and for not defending him more during the hangout. I assured him that I love and trust him deeply and that I would believe what he said. Eventually, Blake told me what happened. Some of you guessed correctly. Blake was planning on proposing to me. He described that when I left, he confided in Sarah that he intended to propose and asked if she could help choose a ring, since she was scheduled to spend time with us again another day. Blake said that Sarah then asked if he was being serious, and when he confirmed that he was, she began screaming and lashing out at him. She screamed that, "This engagement will never happen. You don't deserve her." That is when I came outside. I was utterly shocked. I then hugged him, apologized again, and asked if that was why he had not told me. Blake confirmed that it was because he did not want to ruin the surprise. He then apologized for not telling me, saying that it wasn't worth keeping the surprise if it was causing us problems. I told him it wasn't causing any problems and that I love him even more now. We hugged and made up. Blake then asked what Sarah had said about the situation. I admitted that I hadn't read any of her messages and had turned off my phone out of fear of what she might have said. After a while, I turned my phone back on, and I honestly wished I hadn't. When Sarah said she would not allow this engagement to happen, she truly meant it. I don't know how she could do this, but now she has involved our friends, my sister, my aunt, and even my estranged dad, which was a very low blow. For context, my dad and I are no longer on speaking terms due to an incident with my former stepmother. They are no longer together. After finally reading the messages from our family and friends, it turns out that Sarah told them I'm with a psychopath and that I refused to leave him even though she tried to help. Now, people who once knew the sweet, loving Blake I know think he is now a crazy person and are urging me to leave him. I was and still am beyond furious. I spent the whole night trying to clear the air with everyone, except my dad. Unfortunately, my aunt and some of my friends still agree with Sarah, which breaks my heart. There were many texts from Sarah, ranging from her begging me to answer her to being upset that I was taking Blake's side instead of hers, to apologizing for involving my dad but saying it was for my own good. I sent her only one text, which read, "Copy and pasted. I don't understand how you expect me to take your side when you never explained why you said what you did. Blake already told me what happened, and I cannot even imagine what your perspective is. I can't believe you lied to our friends and my family. And for you to involve my dad, how do you even have his number? Above all, you disrespected my relationship and my boyfriend. I'm extremely upset with you. I have since blocked her. She never explained her motive, so I still do not know what her intention was, other than trying to break us up. Not a great update, but Blake and I are doing okay. He has been very understanding and patient throughout this ordeal, and I am incredibly grateful to him. I know this might not be the end of this nightmare, so I may update again soon. I just do not know how to proceed. How can I convince my friends and my aunt that Blake is a good person? Should I somehow get Sarah to admit that she was lying? Once again, thank you all for your advice. To the Redditor who said my story was fake and that I shouldn't be with someone like Blake, please understand that these kinds of cartoonish situations can unfortunately happen. Also, Blake is one of the best things that has ever happened in my life, and I cannot imagine my life without him. Thank you all, and take care. Next story. I ran into my ex at a Christmas party, and now my best friend is trying to force us back together. But when she found out the truth about our past, everything exploded. I went to my best friend's Christmas and her husband's birthday party on the 24th and met my ex there for the first time since our divorce. Apparently, he is one of my best friend's husband's co-workers. He did not know that I would be there and was as surprised as I was. We made some small talk, and then I went over to chat with another friend. During the evening, we bumped into each other a couple of times. He made a few jokes, but most of the time I tried to avoid him. Yesterday, my best friend sent me a screenshot showing that my ex had asked her husband for my phone number, in case I wanted him to have it, because he wanted to ask me out. The thing is, nobody in this city knows that we were once married to each other. When I moved here 5 years ago from the other side of the country, I never mentioned my divorce, and he did not either. So now, my friend and her husband want to set us up because you seem to have such great chemistry at the party. Another thing is that I never realized how much I missed him until he entered the room. Our relationship was a mistake. We got married because we were the only unmarried couple in our social circle and everyone else was already having babies. The divorce was inevitable. Our communication was poor. I wanted children while he did not, at least not as soon as possible. His mother was meddling, and he never stood up to her. At the same time, we were really good friends, and meeting him again made me very happy. However, I had a conversation with my cousin, 32F, and her husband, who are spending Christmas and New Year's Eve with me. And they advised me not to overreact and said that being nostalgic for what could have been is natural during the holidays. So now I am debating whether to meet him, talk to him, and then be done for good. But the risk of catching feelings again is high. He looked better than he did 5 years ago and finally left his hometown to work for his dream business, something I had encouraged him to do years ago. Am I exaggerating or overreacting? What should I do? Shortly after posting and before replying to my best friend's message, I ran into my ex at the supermarket. We had a brief, cordial conversation, and since I did not want to jump to conclusions without talking to him, we went for coffee afterwards. Long story short, we agreed to remain on friendly terms for our own well-being. He admitted that he felt extremely sentimental after meeting me the last time, and I admitted feeling both giddy and anxious at the same time. He apologized for things he did or did not do during our marriage, mainly for not defending me against his mother, with whom he no longer has any contact. Then we discussed our friends. Some people asked in my original post why I never told my best friend about my failed marriage. The reason is that she might be one of the kindest people I know, but she is very religious, I am not, and extremely against divorce. In her eyes, one should sacrifice one's own happiness for the benefit of others, so getting a divorce is considered the coward's way out. It means you do not deserve love. Her mother-in-law treats her very poorly, and her husband remains quiet because she is pleased that her mother-in-law gave her the most important thing in her life, enduring the rants and boundary violations. Thus, telling her about my divorce would have resulted in one of two scenarios. Either she would never speak to me again because I undermined the idea of marriage, or she would try to reunite me with my ex-husband. A few days ago, one of these scenarios occurred. I had previously told her that I was not interested in giving my ex my phone number, I already had, and neither she nor her husband or my ex's friend knew. Because I was not seeking a relationship. In fact, I am not. My last relationship ended last March due to infidelity and an unwillingness to forgive. She accepted that and invited me for brunch the next Saturday, one of our traditions. On Sunday, my ex called me asking if I was going to my best friend's brunch. He received an invitation. So we were both there, sitting next to each other, with my best friend and her husband trying their very best to spark interest between us. It felt like a scene from a very bad movie similar to that scene in When Harry Met Sally, when they go on a double date with subtle remarks about our common interests, hints at compatibility, and poorly concealed comments about my unsuccessful love life. Until my best friend's husband said, "As far as I know, you would probably make a great wife. My mother likes you, and my best friend's mother loves you. You are every mother's dream." Then my ex said, "Well, my mother used to call you that woman and told me all your shortcomings until I believed her. Actually, she even admitted to disliking you. But in hindsight, you were really a great wife." My ex and I looked at each other and burst out laughing, probably due to the pressure and extreme awkwardness of the situation. My best friend and her husband joined in. For a moment, they thought my ex was joking. Then my best friend's husband said, "We are so sorry for pressuring you. It's just that we like both of you and think you'd make a great couple." My ex then took out his phone, showed them a picture of our wedding day. Why was that there? Because he had sent me some pictures that my dear ex-mother-in-law had withheld from me, and said, "We did, but it did not work out, and now we're just friends. Who wants to go to the cinema?" Chaos ensued. Worldviews collapsed. My best friend started crying, and her husband was astonished. They made us leave so that we could readjust. Yesterday, I spoke to my best friend on the phone and explained everything thoroughly: the abuse by my ex-mother-in-law, the arguments, the incompatibilities, and our mutual decision to end the marriage. I also shared my fear of telling her about it. She was silently crying about my future. She said, "You are already so old and you threw away your only chance at happiness. No wonder you don't find love. You threw it away. It won't come back. Your future with your ex is full of betrayal. If you get back together, you can never repair what you tore apart. What will you tell any partner? I cannot understand how you could do that. You always seem so compassionate. Why couldn't you understand the pain of your ex's mother? She lost her son because of you. You did not respect her wishes and did not listen to her. I'm sure she loved you like a daughter, but you were not ready." That was when I said goodbye, had to leave, and questioned my 5-year friendship. I later spoke to my mom, to my cousin, and even to my ex, who had a similar, though less emotional, conversation with my best friend's husband, who no longer speaks with him at work. They all recommended that I should give my best friend some space. I feel worse than after my last breakup. Edit. After reading all of your comments, I decided to end the friendship. I did not sleep well and spent the entire night writing down what bothered me so that, if she dares to speak to me again, I have the right arguments. Regarding her possible frustration or projection, I essentially acted as her therapist for the entire 5 years of our friendship, and I now realize how codependent and somewhat toxic this relationship truly was. This is something I must overcome, and although I am a rather introverted social mess, I really need to seek new friends who are less judgmental. I told one of my colleagues a summarized version of the conflict, and she divorced and remarried, told me to join her feminist knitting and sewing group, so that is a first step. My ex now faces a similar problem. My best friend's husband told their mutual friend group that my ex had loose morals, and might be a bad influence. Since this is elementary, some of them blocked my ex on social media, some asked him what he had done, and only one told him that A. My best friend's husband is extremely overreacting, and B. He still wants to spend time with my ex no matter what. So now we are in the same, make new friends situation. My best friend's husband even asked his boss this morning if he could arrange for him not to share an office with my ex anymore. So yes, they are also cutting ties. And to the comments asking which culture we belong to, we're all generic Europeans. My ex-friends are simply part of a peculiar Christian church, Protestant, not even Catholic.